Hello everyone, my name is Yujinan. I am an English Literature PhD student at Yonsei University. Today I'm going to introduce you to Giorgio Agamben's The State of Exception. Giorgio Agamben is an Italian philosopher and political theorist born in Rome in 1942. He received his PhD at the University of Rome. He is renowned for his work on the state of exception and Homo Sacer, which are both biopolitical works. His thoughts are influenced by Foucault, Arendt, Benjamin, and Schmidt. Agamben views the extended authority of the U.S. after the attacks of 9/11 as a state of exception. Agamben's state of exception tracks the history and meaning of the state of exception by examining Carl Schmitt's theory of the state of exception and Roman law. Agamben extends his discussion of the state of exception that produces bare life from his previous book, Homo Sacer, which was published in 1998. What is the state of exception? The state of exception is a situation in which the law is suspended, the provisional and exceptional measure that the government exerts in a time of crisis, emergencies, and wars. Now I'm going to look at the history of the state of exception. Agamben introduces how the use and meaning of the state of exception have shifted to a paradigm of the government throughout the history of unrest and turbulence due to wars. By delving into the historical landscape of France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, England, and the United States from the 18th to 20th century, the state of exception is, quote, a kinematic state, an emptiness of law, and the idea of an ordinary indistinction and fullness of power must be considered a legal mythology, analogous to the idea of a state of nature, end quote. Agamben views World War I as an example that shows a state of siege and full power laws. Now, to look at his key critique on Carl Schmitt, Agamben examines the state of exception with a juridical order or outside of it in the Western states' legal traditions. Agamben brings Carl Schmitt's state of exception theory in his two books, Dictatorship and Political Theology, since it inscribes the state of exception in a juridical context. Agamben redefines the relationship between the state of exception and law as, quote, the state of exception separates the norm from its application in order to make its application possible. It introduces a zone of anomy into the law in order to make the effective regulation of the real possible, end quote. In political theology, Carl Schmitt suggests that the sovereign posited outside and inside of law decides the state of exception. Agamben claims that the state of exception is separated from the force of law from the law. Agamben argues that the state of exception is an, quote, anomic space in which what is at stake is a force of law without law, end quote. Agamben mentions how the concept of application in legal theory applies to the state of exception. Schmitt theorized that the application of a norm is not only contained in the norm, but also cannot be derived from it. Now, the other key concept is justitium. Agamben analyzes the justitium in Roman law. Justitium means the suspension of the law. By tracing the genealogy of the justitium, he summarizes The state of exception is not a dictatorship but a space devoid of law, a zone of anomy in which all legal determinations are deactivated. It is essential for the juridical order yet unthinkable for the law. Acts committed during the justitium seem to escape all definition. The idea of a force of without law implies this undefinability and this non-place. The state of exception and the sovereign. The sovereign's death show a suspended law inside of juridical order. Justitium evolved from the suspension of law to public mourning for the death of the sovereign. Agamben recognizes that tumult coincides with the death of a sovereign. The state of exception is connected to the funeral ceremony and the body of the sovereign who is freed by the law. The sovereign who is the living law is, quote, the original form of the nexus that the state of exception establishes between an outside and an inside of the law. It constitutes the archetype of the modern theory of sovereignty, end quote. Through the state of exception, Agamben's discussion lets us comprehend the complexity of the state of exception that is still part of our contemporary life. His analogy of the state of exception as a blank space truly defines it as an ambiguous and mysterious phenomenon. The state of exception's status as within law and outside of law suggests a redefinition of power in history and signifies the system of biopolitics in which the realm of life and law is inseparable. Thanks for watching.